Disclaimer. Judge Ron Rangel is providing this podcast and website for educational purposes only, as well as to give the public general information regarding topics related to the criminal justice system. The views, thoughts, and opinions of his guest speakers are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Judge Rangel. All rise. You are now listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel, educating the public and expanding mindsets. Subscribe on our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform for more of the latest podcast episodes and updates.
Welcome to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. I'm your host. This week on Wednesday, about 6 days ago now, my dad, Adán E. Rangel, who we call Adam, affectionately Big Adam, passed away. He had been having a rough time. I was going to take him to New Orleans, he and my mom, for Christmas, but he became ill right before we went, and he's basically been having a hard time ever since. My dad was kind, he was genuine, he was compassionate, he was very wise, fiercely loving. I was very fortunate to have a father who always showed me that he loved me and always showed me that I was truly the most important thing to him as family. When I was young, I wanted to be a teacher, and my father always encouraged me to want to be a lawyer. I remember being 8 years old, and he would ask, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Ronnie?" And I would say, "I want to be a teacher." He would say, "No, you want to be a lawyer, because lawyers can really make a difference in people's lives. Lawyers can really help folks that are downtrodden, that are impoverished, and that are less fortunate than us. They represent people. And there would be nothing more beautiful than for you to get out there and make the world a better place through the skills that I know you have." And I remember being young and feeling like I didn't look like somebody who I thought would look like a lawyer, and I didn't come from the background of somebody who I thought would have to be an attorney. But my father always encouraged me, gave me love, and as a result of that, I could never be where I'm at today. And my two brothers and my mom will always carry him in our heart, as I'm sure lots of folks in the community will. So I dedicate pretty much the rest of my life to my dad, my lifelong friend, my lifelong best friend. Really kept me grounded, really kept me real, and going forward without them is something that I know I will accomplish in a much stronger way, having them in my heart and in my head. Love you, Dad. All right, let's get back in the show with Constable Kathryn Brown. Today in the studio, I have a Bexar County Precinct 4 Constable Kathryn Brown. Yes. Now, Kathryn Brown is a native of California and the proud mother of 2 adult sons and 3 grandchildren. She loves them very deeply. They keep her inspired and motivated. Mm-hmm. Now, before she became a constable, she worked as an agent with United Airlines, was a realtor in the real estate industry, owned and operated an ice cream shop in Olmos Park. Before she became a constable, she achieved 19 years of service with the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. She attained the rank of sergeant and was actively engaged in community relations, occupying various positions. She's also served on the Honor Guard and Mounted Patrol and had a variety of positions with groups related to law enforcement, advisory, curriculum, and union committees. Welcome, Kat Brown.
Thank you. Honored to be here, sir.
Oh, it is an honor to have you. Well, let's talk a little bit about your history first. You're a native of California. Whereabouts?
Bee Valley. So I grew up around the Castle Air Force Base area because my dad was prior military. And we moved to Palo Alto, California, San Francisco, California. We lived in Oakland. And the last place in California I lived was in the Napa Valley area, Travis Air Force Base, Fairfield, Vacaville area.
And I was born in Oakland. Did I ever tell you that?
Oh, no, you didn't.
Absolutely. I always wondered.
You're so relatable.
Well, you know. I always wondered what it would have been like if my parents would have stayed there and I would have grown up in Oakland. I'm not complaining. So tell me a little bit about the ice cream shop that you had. You know, that's what caught my eye.
Yeah. So I was working over at the controlled access unit at the University Hospital one evening. And I just love entrepreneurship. I think it's the best thing ever in terms of being in control of your schedule, your destiny, income potential. So everything about entrepreneurship is Kathryn Brown. So one night I was going through, I think it was Craigslist, and I found this ad, and there was this deputy that was talking about ice cream. And of course, it was never on my radar. I was like, ice cream. And so he started showing me the ability to make potential income. And, you know, as a Capricorn, we're all about it.
And you're a Capricorn.
You're a Capricorn too?
Oh my God.
So long story short, I went on it on my own and bought the ice cream shop. It was called Boxcar Creamery. And it was in a beautiful, cute little train of cars in Almost Park. And
I've seen that.
yeah. So mine was a little pink one with a little brown ice cream shop. So it was a lot of fun. I had it for 3 years. And then my son, who was running it, decided to go to college. And then that's when I sold it.
Now, another interesting thing, and I know, again, I see you out and about. You are a big proponent of educating folks on cancer projects.
Yes, sir.
I know you've had 2 separate bouts related to cancer, and you are a survivor.
Yeah. So it was back when I was 22 years of age is when I got stage 1 ovarian cancer. And I have to pay tribute, and I always will, to military physicians because that's who cured the first bout with the ovarian cancer. And then 10 years later, while serving at the sheriff's office in 2003, I got breast cancer. And it was stage 1, had a double mastectomy, radiation, and chemotherapy for a second time. But unbeknownst to me, they're both related. And I found out through a genetic testing that I had the BRCA gene. So
what kind of an effect did that have on your life?
It was kind of hard being around all those guys, to be honest with you. You know, the ovarian cancer, I can conceal it a little bit better, but the breast cancer, you're really self-conscious about that aspect of your body. And for most women, it considers you as a definition of a woman, if you will. And so I would wear jackets all the time because I didn't, even though you couldn't tell, I felt like they could perhaps see through my clothing and whatnot. But, Chief Hoagland, who was one of the detention chiefs at the time, put me in for some type of recognition, something with cancer, because I did express it to him and tell him my story. And so after that, after I received a recognition with ThriveWell Cancer Foundation, that's when I said, oh my God, okay, all these people know, so I might as well, I guess, be an advocate at work. And that's what I did and embraced it.
So you've been working for cancer awareness, supporting various community engagement projects.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, you know, and a lot of folks, until it touches them, a lot of folks don't understand the experience. And those of us that love people that have cancer, right? As you know, my wife passed almost 5 years ago.
I remember that.
She had stage 4 colon cancer. And by the time we found out she had it, it was too late.
Yeah.
It was an aggressive form. So kudos to you. Keep on doing what you're doing. I know it's a very personal experience.
Thank you so much.
Sometimes it's difficult to get out there and talk about those kinds of experiences, but it really makes a difference.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what a constable does. What exactly does a Texas constable do?
I have to adhere to your district clerk and your judge's orders, whether it be on the county clerk side or the district clerk side. We do county clerk, district clerk, and JP documents. And what happens is once you render your decision in terms of how the case goes, you force us to serve your papers. And I'm just saying that from a funny standpoint. But yeah, we're tasked with that legally to execute your documents. And believe it or not, deliver a writ of possession. A lot of people don't understand that constables are peace officers. We carry out the same duties and have the same responsibilities as other individuals that are in law enforcement. At my precinct, we also are in charge of the parks. We provide security and do traffic for parks. We have a school, the Juvenile Justice Academy. So we have a school resource officer assigned there, actually 3 of them. And I started a resource center for all law enforcement officers and people that are related to law enforcement, a training resource center for them so that they can get their in-service hours for free, and they can also expand their career path with us for free.
And you started that when you were in the sheriff's office, is that right?
No, I started it at the constable's office.
Okay. All right. So you talked about serving documents. You talked about a writ of possession. I take it that's when somebody's getting kicked out of their home.
An eviction, yes, sir.
And then they had warrants for their arrest.
Yes, sir.
What other kind of documents do you get involved in that you serve on folks?
So we do truant, but with COVID, that has subsided quite a bit. So we no longer do those. If you're going through a divorce and you're not adhering to that divorce decree, we can come and confiscate those items. If you are being evicted and say, for instance, it's a trailer home, we have to confiscate that. And sometimes the person or persons want a sale of it. So we're responsible for that as well. Anything dealing with anything civil where you're suing someone, say for instance, you're suing someone and you don't know what they have in terms of valuable items, we're responsible for finding that information out.
You also mentioned working out in traffic duties.
Yes, sir.
Do you actually pull individuals over and issue traffic citations?
We do traffic citations. We do funeral escorts for individuals. We have done quite a bit with the Lewis Funeral Home.
That's important. We're talking about my wife. When she passed, we had Constable Ruben Tejeda.
Oh,
That
wow.
was an escort over to the cemetery from the funeral home.
Okay.
So those are things that you always remember. Basically, you're there to serve the public
Yes, sir.
in whatever capacity that may be as a law enforcement officer. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir. Oh, another thing that we've done, Judge Rangel, that I like to pay close attention to is that there's a lot of apartment complexes within our area that are high targeted for drugs and human trafficking and things of that nature. And what I've done is I've created like a little hub there for my reserve officers to offer complimentary security to those establishments.
Very nice.
Yeah.
You say our area. So I take it that's your precinct.
Precinct 4.
All
Yes,
right.
sir.
So precinct 4, for those that don't know, is where in Bexar County?
Yes, it's northeast, east, and southeast of Bexar County.
So the county's divided into 4 separate precincts.
4 separate precincts.
So you cover approximately 25% of the population, not necessarily the geographical area. Is that right?
Not necessarily, but we are the second largest precinct.
Yes.
So Ruben Tejeda, Constable Tejeda does have the largest one. I'm trying to see if I can get some more of his territory so I can.
All right. So we talked about your precinct and where you work. How is it that a constable gets that position in Texas?
So you have to have a licensed peace officer education.
And that can come after you get elected, right?
Yes. That's the crazy part. So anyone can go for the job, but they have a year to obtain a peace officer certification through any type of TCOL certified academy.
Mm-hmm.
And once they do that, as long as they pass a favorable background and whatnot, they can become a constable.
You got to run for office?
You have to run for office. Oh, I hate that part. Very unbecoming of me.
Well, you got to run for office. You get elected for a 4-year term.
A 4-year term.
You say it's unbecoming of me because some folks would probably ask, how is it that a constable who is a law enforcement officer runs for a political office? I'm a state district judge. And sometimes people ask, okay, when I go to the ballot box and I need to vote, who's a Republican, who's the Democrat? Frankly, we don't really engage in partisan politics on the bench. And I would assume that you don't do the same when you're working as a constable.
Right, exactly. And yes, we run under a particular political affiliation.
Yes.
However, for me, I have to be quite honest with you, in working in administration at the sheriff's office, I've seen it, where if a sheriff who wins their election comes in and they're hard charging their party, it can cause some sort of disgruntledness amongst your staff because you have some that are Democrat and you have some that are Republican. The more neutral you remain, the better response you get from your subordinates. And that's the position in which I take. I have quite a bit of Republicans and I have quite a bit of Democrats that work for me. And if you look at my Facebook page, you'll never see anything that's political because for me, I don't think it's fair to shove it down their throat in terms of my beliefs. My belief should be the policies and procedures in which they pertain to the constable's office versus what I feel, in my private sector.
So even though as a constable, you're elected in a precinct or in a quarter of Bexar County, you still enforce the laws throughout the entire county, every single precinct.
That is correct. Yes. Bexar County actually, and a county over.
Right.
So,
So adjacent counties as well.
correct.
So you're not in a situation where, is this a rural or is this a municipality?
Correct.
Is this on this side of the line or that side of the line? You actually can enforce the laws wherever it is that you are needed.
Yes, that's what we gave an oath to do. Yes, sir.
You brought up
Mhm.
the idea that you're a woman working in law enforcement in an all-male environment. What is that like?
I thought I had it under control until I became constable.
Uh-huh.
And going to an office where there's never been a woman at all,
Never.
let me tell you,
Mhm.
it was a lot of looking over my glasses and saying, because I said so, because that's what the policy and procedure indicates that you should do,
Mhm.
because that is not legal. You know, it was just an array of things that were coming at me in terms of challenging my strength.
Mhm.
And I'll have to be honest with you with that, because when it comes to me carrying out my duties and upholding the responsibilities of that office, I take it very serious.
Uh-huh.
But I like to have fun and I like to laugh. But when it comes to business, I'm about business.
Uh-huh.
And so when I'm at work, I'm a different character.
So you got to project yourself in a different way.
Oh yeah. But even there, even now, it's going into my third year. I'm starting to loosen up a little bit because they're getting the message.
Uh-huh.
You know, I don't play. Everybody's be fair and consistency is my friend.
Uh-huh.
And what goes for one goes for all. And I always try to give them a buy-in into any decision that I make because, of course, that was their home long before I got there. So I felt that once I did take ownership of that office, that they deserve to have a say and an input in everything that goes on. So once I did that, they were kind of a little bit more like, okay, I guess we'll give her a chance.
So you're not just the first female constable in Precinct 4, but you're also the first African-American female in Bexar County history.
Imagine
Is that right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Uh-huh.
It's weird because it's like, coming from the Bay Area,
Mhm.
the California, that's common, there's a little bit of everything. And so here it's like, wow, okay. I'm not the first African American ever in the state of Texas because there's others.
Mhm.
But the fact that it's Bexar County, military USA, I consider this to be a melting pot. It was a little odd.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. So, of course, I got to leave a decent legacy because when the next one takes my place, I hope they have some big shoes to fill.
Now, your experience at the sheriff's office obviously was something that you relied on, right? It was something that helped you.
Yeah.
And it gave you credibility. It wasn't like you were a part-timer somewhere and then ran for office. Well, law enforcement recruiting and retaining, just generally speaking, across the country has been really tough the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think?
So from my experience, we were averaging about 800 applicants a month. And I will tell you that the biggest issue was the drug usage, the affiliation in terms of the circle of influence that individuals had, the social media.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is a big one because they were posting things that were just so unbecoming. So that's really the hang up for most of our youth today is social media. And of course, the whole drug usage and the criminal aspect of it. Now, when I was on the collective bargaining team, the reason why they lowered the age from, I think it was 21 to 18 is because they couldn't get anyone after they graduated from high school. Why? Because they were going into the military right off the bat. The military was snagging them, or they were getting into trouble. So we started going to the high schools before they graduated to try to get them to commit. That way we would have, someone to I guess, fill the holes and to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
It's real tough.
So when you say social media, you mean social media in terms of what potential applicants are putting out there, but also the perception in the community of what law enforcement is all about.
Oh, yeah. Especially, in the African-American community, it was rough.
Mm-hmm.
For me to even think about selling anything that resembled law enforcement to them. I remember going to Big Mama's house, and it's an awesome organization, but they don't like law enforcement at all. And me, I have such a giving heart and I try to donate things to them. And we were able to get them a stove, but it was through a third party to get the stove to them, through a third party to deliver it, because they just had bad experiences. And I will say this, you got good and bad in my industry and I've seen it.
Like any industry, right?
Yes. And so the individuals that have the ego, and I still see that, that's something that we really, really need to fix. And I think a lot of people aren't paying attention to some of these guys that go into law enforcement after being bullied in high school, or some of these guys that go into law enforcement that feel like they have to have a title, a gun, and a badge that pretty much validates who they are in terms of their character. We get a lot of people who don't know who they are. And this uniform and this badge is what, in their mind, substantiates their character. And so what that does is it gives them some type of personality or persona. And once they get out there in the civilian sector, they become a tyrant. So I wish everybody could go in the military. I'll be honest with you, because those are some of our best recruits. I'll have to be honest, because they've traveled, they've seen some things, they're culturally diverse, and of course they get their education and such. But what I started doing in my precinct to kind of help dilute that ego, if you will, is I started the cardio with the constable. Because I was like, you could stand your hand up against the wall and put your hand on your hip and hold on to your gun all you want to. What do you have without that badge and gun? Can you throw the paws? Can you get down in case, you have to go toe to toe with someone without a weapon? Can you utilize your IPC skills? How do you relate to the public without a badge and a gun? Let me see how you are physically. And believe it or not, a lot of them were breaking down. I was like, okay.
So it's important to have life experience.
Oh, yeah.
It's important to think about who you are without being a law enforcement officer.
What is your name on your birth certificate and who is that person?
Right. Let's do a quick Q&A break. We'll be right back.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at beyondthegavelpodcast.com.
Welcome. We have a question. And as I mentioned before on this podcast, these are not questions that we've looked at before. And this is for both of us, Constable. Is it true that when you're given a traffic ticket, the officer who issued that ticket has to be present during your court date?
Yes, that is true.
And
I would hope so. Because if they're not, it gives definitely preference to the individual who received the citation, as you know.
Well, like anything, right? Court dates.
Yes.
There's always that trial date.
That's
so
right.
Certainly if there's a trial date, you definitely want the officer to be present.
Yes, sir.
That's a good question. Thank you so much for asking.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at beyondthegavelpodcast.com.
Welcome back. I'm here talking to Constable Kathryn Brown, Precinct 4. So as it relates to being a constable, what are the differences between a constable and a sheriff?
So
You probably get that one a lot.
what's weird is that the sheriff did have a huge civil section at one point in time, but he utilized his personnel, in various areas that were more important.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much difference except for they do a huge amount of the domestic calls. They do a huge amount of the traffic industry. He has special units, like I said, the hostage negotiation, the drug task force, I think, if he still has that, and SWAT. He has a lot more resources than we do. And now that we're taking over a huge aspect of the civil section, which most constables' offices here in Texas do, the sheriff's office have very little to do with. That's the only difference.
Well, the sheriff runs a jail. The sheriff provides security for district courts and county courts at law in the courthouse.
Yes, because we also do bailiff duties. Yes.
So for those that don't know, what does that mean?
The bailiff duties?
Yes.
Providing security for you.
For me and for other judges,
Yes.
including justices of the peace.
Oh, yes.
I was in a parade during Fiesta
I saw you.
a couple of weeks ago, and I was fortunate to be walking with one of your colleagues, Leticia Vasquez, constable in Precinct 2.
Yes.
And she gave me a little bit of a rundown of if there is a security issue, I'm here to look out for you, and this is how we're going to handle it. So when y'all are out and about with other elected public officials, you sort of have a charge to make sure that they're safe as
Your
well.
safety and security. That's right.
What are the rules related to safety and security of other folks that you consider?
That's not in the course of our everyday duties. The Martin Luther King March was in our precinct. So what I did was I took the initiative to make sure that we had some people that had SWAT training that were in the reserves and on my full-time staff to look after the public officials, people that were on the grounds at Sullivan Park, and extended those services to them, because that's our area and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to make sure that they're covered all the time, that all eyes are on them, and that we have communication with SAPD, because that's who was handling the actual parade. Make sure that we coordinate with them in terms of emergency exits, backup plans, and things of that nature.
So a lot of what you do is expansive. In other words, you're not confined to do anything.
Correct.
You're basically there to keep the peace, protect individuals that are that are around you. You work all over the county.
Yes. And another thing that we do, Judge, I failed to mention this, is that we do have a task force with DPS.
Uh-huh.
So I have like 5 guys that go out and we target like a really bad area of our precinct and we get in there and get dirty.
Uh-huh.
Let's just say it like that.
There was a series of articles that came back some years ago, and I think there used to be 5 constables in Bexar County, and there was one that was actually eliminated, but a part of that came from some pressure for the commissioner's court to consider actually abolishing the constable's offices in Bexar County.
To abolish a constable, to me, would be doing a huge disservice to the community.
It would have to come through a constitutional amendment.
And I hope that amendment is nowhere to be found right now. But long story short, it would behoove everyone to keep a constable's office nestled in the community because it gives us a chance to truly identify with the people like up front, close and personal. They're usually in a neighborhood in which, you can come drive to and handle your services and take care of business without having to come down to the courthouse or go down to a major police station and things of that nature. Our offices are a little bit more, I want to say user-friendly, or the appearance is a little bit less intimidating than coming downtown. So I think our success rate in terms of getting business done is a little bit better than maybe a sheriff's office or police department.
You're saying you're in the precincts, you're with the people.
That is correct.
Right.
And we also do a lot of initiatives, like I have a housing initiative, housing resource initiative, have a pantry initiative, have a cooking with a constable initiative. So I have all those things to help us to build that rapport with the people that are in our community.
Well, that makes sense. And the relationship seems important. So to me, this is what I think about. Policing, when you started 19 plus years ago, locally, has probably changed quite a bit since that time, right? So policing in 2023 is different. In what ways?
With the recent gun issues that we've had, it has forced us in some instances to build that rapport or to initiate some type of initiatives, such as another one that we have with my reserve department, retired SAPD, that developed this program called Walk a Mile in My Shoes. And he just started the midnight basketball again. So it is causing us to definitely move forward in that direction. It's also helping us to educate people, Black and brown, of what do you do? How do you engage in law enforcement? What should you say? And a lot of them, we have to be honest and say, look, if you're afraid of what officers are doing, why don't you purchase a cam so that you could be accountable for your behavior as well as the officer being accountable for his or hers? So we've suggested that. With my kids, it's straight up, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And they're 37 and I got one that's 30. And I wish they would forget to say yes, ma'am. So that goes a long way as well in terms of respect. I've also had to let them understand that if they're not happy with the service in which they get with the initial officer, everybody has a supervisor. All you have to do is just Google it, pick up the phone and try to find out what their internal affairs number is to try to get your point across. So we just have to let them know what their options are in terms of dealing with a crummy officer, because there's, just like you have crummy people out in the civilian sector, you have crummy officers. So
there's been a lot of talk in social circles and the media lately about reform in criminal justice. How does that look like from your perspective?
Prop A was, I guess, an attempt. I think, again, they said that it was to help with the jail population, which we do have a problem. There's just not enough outside entities, I guess, to ship inmates off to with our situation here in Bexar County. That's why the sheriff is having such a hard time. And then you have a retention issue with, the jail, in which you can't keep officers there. So
do we really have a jail population issue in Bexar County?
Oh, gosh, yeah. They're up in the 4,000s. Yeah. So
now it's a population of 2.1 million?
I believe so.
Okay. I'm not advocating for anything particularly especially because of my position, but I do hear in the community saying, okay, you got 2.1 million folks that live in Bexar County. You got 4,000 people that are incarcerated for a lot of reasons, not just necessarily because they have pending cases. We have about 500 fewer inmates in the district courts than we had last year at this exact same time. We actually have lower caseload numbers now than we did pre-pandemic. So one of the things that makes the issue complicating is that you're dealing with different departments or different organizations. In other words, you have the sheriff's office that not only needs to coordinate with the courts, but also with the police. They also need to coordinate with the prosecutors. they also need to coordinate with defense attorneys. And so if you could use things like video visitation between defense attorneys and the jail, then theoretically a lot more can be done. The issue is that jail doesn't have enough folks to staff it to make those kinds of visitations amenable. And so now you're talking about funding issues. And I don't know how much you want to get into that.
I wonder how could we help?
The thing about bureaucracies is you have two key facets. The first one is you have a tendency as a bureaucracy to look inward. In other words, you don't look to see how your department or organization connects to other departments to make things better. And so as a result of that, the second facet is you're always blaming the other departments or organizations for failures within the system. So it's like we are doing our part. It's the other people's fault for whatever failure there is. And so then
accountability is a beautiful thing.
That's right. And so then what happens is that you never have those connections made. And as a result of that, things don't happen. But I think in Bexar County, I think we've come a really long way in finding those connections. I could give you lots of different examples, but clearly when you're dealing with such a bureaucratic structure like county and state government, you're always going to have some issues where there's going to be some disconnects. So if we can just consistently work to find those disconnects and make them fit better, then theoretically things would run a whole lot better. But are things really that bad?
I think if we were more...
Because you worked in the sheriff's department for a long time.
Yeah.
So you have a very unique perspective.
On the record, when I left, me being in charge of recruiting, I was down about 60 folks, y'all. So that's on the record. And that's in black and white, and black and white doesn't lie. So I don't know what happened.
And now, what's going on now?
Ooh, I think it's like up to the 400s. Yeah.
Does pay have anything to do with that?
Oh, they just got a huge bump in pay. Yeah, they're starting more than constables now in a controlled environment, mind you. So they should never have a problem in terms of hiring people. Again, I will, on the record, say this because I know for a fact it's not really getting people in, it's retention.
Right.
You know, who wants to work so many hours of overtime, you know, per week, and that's what's killing them. Again, I have to go back to, you know, the walls are packed because of trying to get people to court, you know, and that's just something that we really need to look at. But everybody has to be a team player. And like you were talking about just a few minutes ago, Judge, about accountability. And my philosophy as being constable and how I've always been is I'm a straight shooter. I don't have to go tell that person how I feel and that other person. I have to go to the source and let them know this is what's going on. How do I fix it? You know, because if you don't have those close connections and speak your true honesty, nothing will ever get done.
Well, one of the things that you're talking about in terms of cases and keeping those jails packed is we talked about case numbers being down, but the types of individuals that are currently incarcerated are a different type that existed pre-pandemic. Because of the pandemic, we're unable to try those higher level cases where somebody is looking at a violent charge. And as a result of that, plea bargains are much harder to come about because a plea bargain offer, let's say, of 30 years for a murder may be attractive to some, but it's not going to be attractive to somebody who's saying, well, that means life, in essence. And so because of how the pandemic has affected the courts, there is a much higher, and I hate to use this term, but higher violent type offenses of folks that are incarcerated face.
Yeah.
In other words, you got a lower level drug case. Well, those are easy to, generally speaking, if it's a state jail felony, those are easy to resolve through the system, whereas a higher level violent case is more difficult to process through.
So is that what the jail is currently housing the
Yes.
majority of?
Yes. The level of offender is much more serious now than it was pre-pandemic. And those are the kind of cases that are harder to move through the system because generally speaking, those are the ones that go through the jury trials. Those are the ones that have the, you know, victims and media attention and community attention, as opposed to a low-level theft or a drug case or a graffiti charge or something like that. So we're talking about police reform and what that looks like. So one of the things that's different now than existed just a few years ago is the fact that every deputy has a camera on their person. Is that right? A body cam. How has that changed policing, in your opinion?
Accountability. Accountability. Fortunately, not all of us are utilizing. I think Precinct 1 is still in the process of getting their body cams, but Precinct 1, 2, and 3 are currently utilizing them. And it's really good on our end too, because we get a lot of accusations, thrown at the officers and whatnot. And like I tell my deputies, if the camera's not on, it's your word against theirs. And number one, you're going to face the consequences because that is a policy. And so that has helped us tremendously. And in fact, last week we were able to see through the body cam because there was a question, was there shots fired or not? And the body cam definitely showed that there were shots fired. So little intricate details that we need for our report writing and things of that nature to match the actions up with match the actual events up with our reports are amazing.
But we're talking about jail population. And so one of the things that has really changed within the court system is that the Michael Morton Act came through some years ago. I don't remember exactly when off the top of my head. I'm thinking it was a good 8 years ago. That's a guess, where the state has to provide all of the discovery, everything that they have within their possession over to the defense. And now with all the footage on body cams, it takes attorneys, it takes prosecutors and defense attorneys a significant amount of time because the Michael Morton Act didn't contemplate all of the footage that would be available. So imagine an arrest and there's a lot of police officers there, or some offense that the police officers have reported to.
Yeah.
That's hours and hours and hours of
That's
extra
insane.
body cam video that did not exist before. And so as a result of that, it's taking cases a lot longer to go through the court system, right? So there's all of these little effects, changes in the law that improve the system. But on the other hand, it makes it much more difficult to have cases looked at and in a timely manner.
Wow. I never considered that.
All right. So we talked about, you mentioned a little bit about having an officer's presence in the community, making sure that the relationship is improved between those, particularly folks of color that have grown up and not necessarily looking at the police as their friends. What sort of community policies or policings do you think would be helpful in this kind of an environment that we live in 2023?
For me, I've allowed my officers to pick where they want to be in terms of their districts. And then I pick where I want them to be for their districts because I want them to get used to that diversity. I had one in particular that was afraid to go to certain areas of town during their training. And I made that his first district when he got out of training, because they have to get acclimated to everybody. You may not look the same and whatnot. You may not have the same belief systems and whatnot, but they should all be treated fairly. And so I make them go to also, I'm such a bad constable mama. I make them go to different events and whatnot around, our precinct so that they can meet the people in person, interact with them. When I started the pantry, I put little bags in their towels. When you go to effect a writ of possession and you're there, have a look and see if anybody needs anything, see if their cupboards are bare or whatever, offer something to them so that you can let them know, yes, I have to do my job, but here's an extra, set of canned goods or sanitary items for you. I don't know where you're going. And if you need housing resources here, call this number kind of thing. So it doesn't always have to be bad. You can also implement some type of empathy towards the situation. It becomes, yes, a mandated job assignment, but they're also engaging with the community in that respect.
What are some of the things that the deputies do that work with you that make you proud?
Oh my God, a lot. I just love my crew, and you'll see on Facebook, I'm always like praising them and whatnot. And the behind the scenes, I get in that butt, which is true. But the fact that they take the initiative, like I have a deputy by the name of Guerrero. He has a precinct, but he also stops to local venues and local agencies and stuff and see how they're doing and checking on them and whatnot and see if they need anything. I have an assistant chief that I just recently promoted, and he's one of these people that if I have to tell them what to do, I need to be doing what they're doing as well. I got to lead by getting my hands dirty right along with them. So yeah, they're just an amazing crew.
Kathryn, are there any last words that you would like to impart to the listeners?
Just know that we're experiencing some rough times. We've had some issues with our building being shot at. Have to be very transparent. We've had some issues in terms of one of our deputies. And we're experiencing sometimes with massive school shootings and mall shootings and things of that nature. I just ask that you keep us in your prayers. Law enforcement today is not easy. And just know that we're doing our best to continuously build that rapport out there with you. And know that we're the same as you and bleed red alongside with you.
I'm always grateful for the people that put on the uniform and put on the badge every day, face dangers that they could never imagine. And I recognize that our community is really one, right? It doesn't matter which side of the bar you sit on. We're all in this together.
Absolutely.
And we need each other to have a successful future as Americans and as Texans.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I appreciated you coming on. Well, you've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. Join us in the next 2 weeks where we are educating the public and expanding mindsets. Head to our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform to subscribe to the latest episodes and updates.